We'll get started in just a minute, folks. Okay, here we are. Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm excited for a conversation with Lindsay Ziegler. She is President of the Andrew James Advisory Group and also Chair of the U.S. Tag to ISO TC 251, and we will get into that shortly. But before then, we want to thank our patron members, Jacobs, Definitive Logic, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, as well as all our organizational members. Big thank you for making programs like this possible, as well as our recent events in Washington, D.C. at the National Academies and with the National Institute of Building Sciences. This is a little out of date, but I will just say Jim Dieter is the ALN CEO, and he is going to be primarily talking with Lindsay today. But Lindsay, maybe, oh, there he is.
Hello.
Howdy, Jim.
Hey, how are you today, Nick?
Great, I got my best shirt on.
The Mentor APM shirt, nice. Nice. All right, well, Lindsay, should I introduce Lindsay? Huh? Let's see how to introduce Lindsay. Gotten to know ALN has gotten to know Lindsay as through AJAG, Andrew James Advisory Group, and teaching the classes associated with the A55K certification. And ever since she first got involved, she's been gotten more and more involved in the ALN. So she has an ALN role, an important ALN role. But more importantly, from my perspective, in my second stint of being the chair and head of delegation of the U.S. Tag to TC 251, after we finished our meetings in Philadelphia last May, seemed it was time for me to step down and for some new people to step up. So Jack Dempsey became the head of delegation, and Lindsay became the chair of the U.S. Tag. So the U.S. Tag has just finished its, TC has just finished its meetings in Rio. So Lindsay can tell us about Rio and lots of other stuff. So welcome, Lindsay. Did I leave anything important out of your recent bio?
Out of recent stuff? No, that was good. Thank you.
I thought, as a place to start, as insiders, we tend to know how it all works and why it happens. But could you maybe just provide some background for people on the ISO and the TC process, and what that means to be chair or head of delegation when you go to those kind of meetings?
Yeah, it's the whole setup is actually rather complex, and it took me a while to get my head around it and figure out how it works. So ISO is at the top level. That's the International Standards Organization, although they will tell you that it doesn't stand for anything. But yeah, everybody is pretty well aware that it does. Within ISO, we have what they call technical committees, and every technical committee or every major set of standards belongs to a technical committee. So the technical committee that I'm part of, and Jim is also part of, is TC 251, and that's the one that owns the asset management system standards. So that the ISO 55000 series. It is an international organization. So within TC 251, there are a number of countries that have membership in that technical committee. And they will have individuals who help develop the standards that are in process. So within TC 251, then we have working groups. And right now we have 7 working groups. 6 of them are, each one is in charge of a document that's currently under development and nearly ready to go. And then the seventh one, work group 3, is all about communication, both internally within TC 251, between TC 251 and the other technical committees and liaison committees, and then out into the greater world. So they're also responsible for any kind of social media outreach type of stuff, dealing with TC 251. Now we have a group that in the US called the US TAG, or US Technical Action Group, that kind of oversees all of the individuals who work with the ISO work groups. So it's a little confusing. And when you add mirror committees in there, that gets really confusing. So for example, you have work group 4 is the group that is currently working on ISO 55000, the 00 standard. And then the US TAG has what we call a mirror committee, which is members of the US TAG who get together and talk about things that are being discussed in work group 4 in advance of the global work group 4 meetings. So the structure works. It's a little hard to grasp at first, and it took me a little while. But that's basically the structure that we're dealing with. We're dealing with TC 251 on a global level and the US TAG to TC 251 on the domestic level.
So you got on a plane and flew down. Why'd you fly down to Rio? Why'd you go to Rio? What was going on down there?
Well, last May, as you know, Jim, we had the first global meeting of TC 251 in person since the beginning of the pandemic. And that meeting, Jim, by the way, organized it. And thank you, Jim. It was fabulous.
Thank you.
That meeting, we think, set a precedent for in-person meetings coming back from the pandemic, because there was so much accomplished at that meeting. It's amazing what you can get done when you get all the players in a room together for 8 hours a day for a full week. Excuse me. That was an incredibly successful meeting, and the result of that meeting was that the chair of TC 251, who's a gentleman named Reese Davies, decided that that was so good that we needed to have the next meeting in person as well. But as a group, the countries involved said, yeah, but please, if you're going to have it in January, not winter, let's go someplace warm. So the Brazilian delegation stepped up and said, you can have it in Rio. And that's why I flew to Rio about a week and a half ago. And we had, the pre-registration was, I think, 49 people and 14 countries. So decent turnout. And of course, it was Rio. Naturally, because we had decided to go to Rio, it decided to rain all week.
Well, that's okay, because you were busy being inside and doing all that work, right?
We actually were, yeah, for the most part. Excuse me.
So one last question about process. So you show up there, and what happens? I mean, what's the reality of being there?
So the reality is that working groups are assigned a location to meet in, and sometimes a time. So working groups 4 and 6, which are the ones working on the 00 and the 01 standards, we were expected to work together for the entire week. In reality, we got done a little early. So both groups had an afternoon free where we could go out and walk on the Copacabana beach if we wanted to, or drive around Rio, or do whatever we wanted to do. But what happens in these rooms, I can only speak with any accuracy to work group 6, which is the group I'm in. We had a draft that we have been working on since Philadelphia, and we had several hundred comments from the member countries that we needed to sort and sift through and figure out how to respond to. And by the time we got to Rio, we had dealt with most of the comments that had been submitted, and we had, in particular, we concentrated on the ones that were more critical, and the ones where there was a section of the standard that had a lot of comments on it, because we figured that meant there was a certain amount of unease about the content of that particular section. So we dealt with all of that before we got to Rio, but we still had a couple of hundred comments that we needed to work our way through in Rio before we felt comfortable releasing the standard. And I know work group 4 was doing the same thing. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I picked up something in Rio that was not something I wanted to pick up. So if I keep clearing my throat, I apologize. The remaining work groups, 5, 7, 8, and 9, their documents were nearly done. And so those work groups actually spent maybe a half a day polishing up their documents, and then they went out, those members went out and sat in on other work groups and helped with other work groups. So a lot of conversation going on, a lot of discussion and back and forth. And then towards the end of the week, we in work group 6 did two things. We met with work group 4 to make sure that their 00 revision and our 01 revision will mesh properly, so that they're not completely skewed and off base. And we spent a morning doing that. And then we spent the rest of the week looking forward. So 55,000, 55,001, and 55,002 were originally released in 2014. So this is the first revision since 2014 for the 00 and 01 standards. And if you follow any kind of business, you know the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years. 55,002, which is the standard that provides guidance for implementing an asset management system, was revised in 2018. But because it was trying to map back to the 2014 versions of 00 and 01, there were some things that didn't quite fit. And so they kind of had to stick them in there somewhere. So part of what happened during this plenary session was an agreement that the next task we're going to take on is a revision of 02 to map back to the new versions of 00 and 01. And so work group 6 has been tasked with the 02 revision. So we're rolling right out of 01 and into work 02. And we spent part of that week working on what our convener, Martin Kerr, calls a definition of good. So it's basically a design spec for the revision of 55,002. And we've been working on that for the last half of last week.
So, as of my experience, there's always some issues or topics or things that dominate the conversation, beyond or on top of or underneath the process. Were there any such things that might be of interest?
There were in Philadelphia, definitely. There were some pretty hot topics, but this session really did not seem to be terribly controversial. There was still some discussion about the hierarchy between asset management and asset management systems. But nothing really, yeah, that graphic right there. But there really was no major disagreement. Work group 6 in Philadelphia, there's a whole new section on data and information 7.6 in the 55,001 standard. And in Philadelphia, we were tasked with looking at, is that section too much? And we felt that there was a lot of really good best practices in there that aren't scalable for small organizations. And so in Philadelphia, we pulled those out with the knowledge that we were going to discuss them further and that they might perhaps be better suited to be 55,002, which is guidance on how to implement. So we did have some discussions with the original authors of that section down in Rio. They called in. Unfortunately, the UK delegation wasn't able to join us. And these mostly came from the UK delegation. But they called in and we had a good discussion about it. And they told us what their thought process was in adding these items to the standard. And we talked about how we were concerned about scalability for small business because some of these items they imply some very expensive processes and possibly some very expensive systems to go with them. And in the end, we all agreed that, yeah, this can go into the guidance document. So that was the closest I came to any controversy during the week.
So we're going to have probably a couple other people join us. But before we get to that, so we can expect these standards to be published next week or what?
So at the end of the session, all 6 standards, there are 6 documents coming out, and they were all released at once for final draft stage to go to the ISO editing team. So the ISO editing team now has at least 6 documents that they need to work on right now. So I don't know exactly when they're going to get to it. We suspect they're going to be kind of backed up. And that even assumes that none of the other technical committees are sending anything to the ISO editing team, and that's probably not a good assumption. So film at 11, basically, we hope to have those standards back from the ISO editing team in the next month or so. But, you know, we can't really put money on it because we don't know, you know, what their staffing situation is and how much manpower they can put on it, frankly. So
they'll be released this
in
year?
2024. And they're supposed to be released, I believe, by mid-year. One of them, I think it's 013. No, it's 10. Doesn't have to be out until like September or October, but it's done. It's ready. So that working group is perfectly ready to move forward and not wait.
Super. So who else from the U.S., not to put your memory on the spot, but who else from the U.S. Was there in Rio?
Well, Jack Dempsey was there, obviously. He's our head of delegation. Lori Gray was there. Bob Leach was there. Who else was there?
Sorry, I shouldn't have put you on the spot with the memory question. I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, Shiv Iyer was there. And what is her name? The convener for work group 9.
Tiffany.
Tiffany, thank you. Tiffany Batak was there. She wasn't able to join us until late in the week, but she was there. I feel like there's at least one other person whose name I've forgotten, and if so, I apologize to everyone.
I'll try not to ask questions like that anymore. Sorry.
Or at least give me a heads up so I know.
Well, it looks like, speaking of former heads of the US TAG, Chris Gawley has joined us.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, everybody.
Have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share off the top, Chris?
First, what I like to do is thank you all the US delegates to Rio. You know, I've been traveling internationally for over 25 years. I know what it means. I've been to many plenary meetings in Australia, Japan, Europe, and so on. And I know what it means to spend a week out there is not fun. From time to time, maybe, but it's really hard work. So thank you all, you delegates. You made US TAG proud, and wholeheartedly believe it. I'm a member of work group 3, 4, 6, 8, 9. So I was trying to keep up with what's happening during the plenary meetings. So I was usually starting from 5 a.m. on 3 or 4 update meetings, and I can only say that I'm really, really pleased with the progress, because I think a lot of progress has been made, and I believe the documents are basically ready.
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to please everybody. It's impossible. People coming from different backgrounds, different culture, different languages. I know there was a lot of talk about how we're going to translate this to Spanish, to Chinese, and so on. So, Jim, you've been on US TAG for a long time. You know how this goes. And Lindsay, you mentioned one chapter in Work Group 6 that was kind of a little bit, under discussion. I can only say you were lucky that UK delegation couldn't attend this. And Jim, you know what I mean, right? But I'm really proud what US TAG did and US delegates.
And it turns out that we had 3 people from the UK there, but they were all officials. So Ashley Barrett and Lois Appleyard, who has replaced Charles as the overall secretary, I think, for TC 251. And then Tom Goodyear, who is the chair-elect. They're all 3 from the UK, but because they are officials, they were not allowed to represent the UK. So it was interesting, but
Not officially allowed to represent the UK.
right, not officially allowed. But I think Chris made a good point that one of the things that the conveners were very good about doing was they held briefings usually every morning in the early morning for all the people who were not able to be there and attend. And that was where they could not only talk about what was covered the previous day, but they could get everybody's opinions. And we did have some information and some comments that came from those morning meetings that we then talked about and resolved in our daily sessions.
Let's see, Nick, did we try to talk Lori into joining us, or did
I didn't hear anything from her in the chat, but she's welcome to join. Just send us a message and we can add you to the panel, Lori, if you're out there.
Lori was very helpful. She named the other person I missed, Kevin Slavin.
Yeah, good.
Thank you, Lori.
She's coming in as a panelist.
Yay.
Okay. Lori was won the Rookie of the Year award for Philadelphia. She came in, and it's pretty challenging to come into a process that's been going on for 10 plus years and like make any sense of it. And she hit the ground running. It's awesome. So hi, Lori. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, that was an experience. First time out of the country.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. But like Lindsay said, all working groups, yeah, I couldn't imagine. We discussed in detail. It was pretty harmonized. And came to conclusions very quickly. A lot of it didn't drag on. It was either a yes or a no. And Martin, the convener, just, yeah, he did a fabulous job of just, this is it, next, this is it, next. And it really helped keep everything going as it was supposed to go. Lindsay did an outstanding job as well, bringing forth to our working group on where we stood as the US tag. So she informed us also with all the different discussions, what was happening. For some reason, my company wouldn't, the IT system wouldn't work, so I couldn't get a lot of the information. So Lindsay did a great job bringing everything back to me of what was going on in the morning discussions. But yeah, it was great.
It is an amazing, it's hard to convey the feeling of it, but when you're involved in this, you're part of a delegation from the US, and we are representing the interests of the United States as a US tag, and in particular as the delegates. And Lindsay has done, and we have done in the past, Chris did, we make a real effort to assure we're doing the best to represent US interests, as diverse as they may be. And that has actually played a significant role in a lot of our decisions. Sometimes we take popular stances, and sometimes we take less popular stances based on what's best for us. But so Nick, you had a question there.
Oh, did I have a question?
Well, your comment about the big picture. So
Well, yeah, I just didn't want the session to go by without saying, how important these standards are to provide guidance in what is often said, that it's not necessarily rocket science, what these documents discuss, but it's really important stuff and a framework to make sense of a very complex ecosystem of moving parts with great weight. So it's really important to have standards that a diverse group of stakeholders come together to create, to kind of steer and give best practices across the board, so to speak.
anybody want to add anything more to those thoughts of why are we doing this, or why does it matter?
Why not to do it? That would be a question. Why not to do it?
Why not? Yeah. I like Nick's comment that he made about liking the attention to involving stakeholders from different cultures. It does take, it takes discussion. Sometimes it takes compromise. Sometimes it takes voting. And the idea here is you want to get something that is as close to a global, worldwide consensus on how this should read and what we should be doing, as close as possible. As Chris said, you're never going to satisfy everybody. And in fact, no document is ever perfect. I spent a lot of years working in computer technology, and it is axiomatic in computers that every program has a bug. Don't care how heavily it was tested, don't care how wonderful it is, it has a bug somewhere, and somebody will find it. And I think that thought process can also apply here. What we're looking at is, yeah, these documents are not perfect. I know that we have people within the US who have things that they're not happy about in the current draft of the documents, but they are a major improvement over the 2014 version, I believe. And they have an international consensus for them. So this is something that is, without a doubt, in my mind, is going to move forward. And these are going to be new standards promulgated in 2024.
Talking about cultures, I had the opportunity to live on 3 continents and work on 6 of them in different cultures. So I learned a little bit. And just I learned one thing. You don't know much. You always learn, because there is a many way to skin a cat. Which way is the best? Who knows? If it's working for you, it's okay. And
Yeah.
as I mentioned before, it is a consensus base. So nothing is perfect, like Lindsay said, but who can define perfection? And we know that perfection is enemy of good. So
Yep.
So
Yeah.
along that- go ahead, Lindsay, I'm sorry.
If we insisted on perfect, we would never publish anything.
So in the when we were working on the 2014 version, nobody knew much about asset management. There wasn't much awareness about it in general. And despite some of our frustrations of people around the world that more people aren't certified, which is a fine thing to aspire to. But there's no question that the impact of this effort and aligned efforts like the ALN and the IAM and the Australian group, the Canadian group, et cetera, that the visibility of asset management has greatly improved. So there was these perhaps unintended or at least surprising outcomes of the 2014 version. Care to take have any thoughts on what the jump or the bump we might expect to see from this version of the documents?
I think the thing that we're seeing really globally is an increased awareness of the difference between managing assets, which is, maintenance, engineering, all of that stuff, which is very important. But asset management and an asset management system is a higher level and involves a broader part of the organization. And the reason it's important is because you are wanting to use asset management to optimize your value from assets. And that's a different way of looking at asset management than has historically been around. And what I've been seeing just in the last couple of years is it does seem that organizations are starting to come around to the idea that maybe there's something good here, and maybe this is something that we as an organization can benefit from.
Gloria's, you're working, I don't want to put you on the spot, but working for an asset owning organization. What do you have any thoughts on this topic?
I do. Also just from our organization, but then looking at it from the state of Michigan as well, and it's globally. How are we managing our assets? How are we managing our bridges? How are we managing our roads? From the very beginning of design to all the way down to decommissioning. And how are we putting what we have taken and putting it back to its natural state, instead of polluting it, so to speak, and to where people won't want to, reuse it again. So there's a lot of thought processing behind all of that. And I know, being with the board now for 5 years, and we've got it implemented into one of our facilities, and now we're gradually moving the scope into another one of our facilities. That was the easiest way to do it. A lot of times change is very hard, and people always say, you're just the flavor of the month. But once you can get one portion of your company going and they can see the outcome of it, it helps everyone kind of want to have what the other one has. And they see the processes, they see the procedures, they see better maintenance and reliability within these assets, and they're wanting it. So I know it's helped us internally within our organization. When I first got there, we had a data historian. All the data was in the data historian. Well, how do we get it? How do we And nobody really thought of that until we started looking at asset management. And so we had to get IT involved and pull out all the data and the data historian and who's going to hold it, who's going to monitor it, and, what does PDM look like? We want to be more proactive and not reactive. Especially, we've got newer facilities, and we want to make sure we're maintaining those facilities. I know we're a little bit above everybody here in the state of Michigan as far as getting the lead out of the water mains. So we have been able to do that. And we're looking at expanding. So, we have a lot of things in the pipeline coming to us, and it's good management, asset management that's going to help it.
Well, that's good. That's in the pipeline. That's never more appropriate.
Yeah.
That's a great story, Lori.
Thanks.
No, really well said. Well, Mike, was anybody else going to join us, or do you have any? Mike, you haven't gotten a word in today. Or is your computer working good enough to share some thoughts of what this looks like from an ALN perspective, perhaps?
Well, you'll have to tell me if my sound is going crazy or not. Maybe I'm having a good moment. But this is a wonderful discussion. And based on what Lindsay said about what happened and what Chris and Lori indicate is the passage of a number of standards that move the ball forward. There'll be a lot of global attention focused on this, and will give the Asset Leadership Network an opportunity to convert some of that momentum into actual organizations taking up the cause of asset management, maybe like Lori says, one department at a time, in order to get their organizations moving forward. It's actually kind of exciting to see what will happen, but I'm sure there's going to be a big surge. We've got to figure out a way to get on the cover, asset management on the cover of Time and Newsweek.
And I'd say also that we hope to, we haven't finalized it, but we hope to have Jack Dempsey on, who is the head of delegation, is the technical lead. Hope to have Jack Dempsey on, and we would continue this discussion, but more focused on each of the documents, and maybe provide a little information on each of the documents, or wherever Jack would like to take us in a future discussion, hopefully in the not too distant future. Jack says he's on. Good. Well, I think we perhaps have wrapped it up. Does anybody have any final words they'd like to say before we turn it back over to Nick? Well, I'll just say thank you all for all you do for the TC, for the US tag, and most of you for the ALN as well. So thank you very much.
And thank you to the Brazilian team who hosted us in Rio. That they did a good job.
Good deal. Okay, Nick, we're a little long, not too long.
Okay, yeah, and we just want to one more thank you for our patron members: Jacobs, Definitive Logic, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, and all our organizational members, especially Asset Management Partnership. We didn't get to hear from Jack Dempsey today, but we will soon, I am sure. And Mentor APM for giving me this awesome shirt.
Nice. Okay, thanks. Thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye.